Welcome to the October 18th, 2022 joint meeting of the Eugene and Lane County Planning Commissions. I'm now calling this meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission to order. My name is Daniel Isaacson, and I am the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. I'm joined now by my fellow planning commissioners, Commissioner Beeson, Commissioner Ramey, Commissioner Bailing, Commissioner Edwards, and Commissioner Lear. Commissioner Fragla had a prior engagement tonight, but she reached out to me and let me know that she will not be in attendance, but will be watching these proceedings later on to get caught up to speed.
And good evening. I'm Kathy Smith. I am now calling this meeting of the Lane County Planning Commission to order. I'm the chair of the Lane County Planning Commission, and I'm joined by my fellow commissioners, Charles C. Kaler, Stephen Dignam, Kristen Woodall, Bruce Hadley, Eliza Kaczynski, Stephen Snyder, and Jeff Choate. And Johnny Peacock has not yet joined us.
Well, thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables the planning commissions to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping our members, staff, and the public safe. Anyone wishing to access or participate in the meeting can do so by following the access instructions listed on the agenda for the meeting. The Eugene Planning Commission meetings can also be viewed by watching the live stream available on the website or the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21. Tonight, we're holding a a public hearing on urban reserves adoption. Before we begin receiving public testimony, we'll have a brief presentation from staff to introduce the project. When we're ready to begin the public hearing, staff will provide instructions about the virtual hearing format and how to participate. The urban reserves proposal we are discussing tonight applies to the area outside of the Eugene urban growth boundary, sometimes referred to as the UGB. We are conducting this hearing jointly with Lane County Planning Commission because there is a joint project between the city and the county. To provide some context, the Eugene Planning Commission, or the planning commissions in general, are not the final decision makers of this matter. After the two planning commissions have reviewed the proposed amendments and the other relevant material provided by staff, including testimony from the public, each planning commission will make a recommendation to its own elected officials, the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Then the City Council and the Board of Commissioners will consider their Planning Commission's recommendations, and they will hold their own joint public hearing before making their final decisions on urban reserves adoption. I'd like to now introduce the project manager, Rebecca Gershow from the Eugene Planning Division, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Isaacson. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Can everybody see that okay? Great. So thank you everyone for participating tonight. My name's Rebecca Gershow. I'm a senior planner with the City of Eugene, and I'm the Urban Reserves Project Manager. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Zoli Godden-Dalton, Thea Evans, and Emily Jerome with the City of Eugene, and Lindsay Eichner, who is a principal planner with Lane County. I have a brief presentation before we open the public hearing. It's very high level. For those who attended the work sessions earlier this month, it is an abbreviated version of that. So thank you for your patience as we all get on the same page. We'd like to spend some background slides talking about urban reserves, which it's a partnership with Lane County. We're planning for the next 2 generations until 2059. We've been working together on urban reserves planning, the city and the county, since 2018. Urban reserves identifies the best areas for Eugene to grow into beyond the urban growth boundary when additional land is needed for our growing population. Land in urban reserves will remain rural unless it's incrementally brought into Eugene's UGB through a formal process. Urban reserves are important now for a number of reasons. As we all know, housing supply and affordability are critically important issues in our community, and urban reserves is one piece of that puzzle. In 2015, the City Council, supported by the County Board of Commissioners, directed staff to do this work and set aside funds to prepare an urban reserves proposal for their consideration. This is aligned with other projects that the city is working on focused inside the urban growth boundary, such as the city's growth monitoring program and the middle housing code amendments. Urban reserves has been a collaborative effort with public engagement impacting the results of the planning process. We've worked with a variety of stakeholders from property owners, residents, utility and service providers, and other local governments to our Technical Advisory Committee, the ETAC, which is made up of volunteers from inside and outside of the city who reviewed the project's technical analysis at 18 different meetings. Collectively, staff has met with the Lane County and Eugene Planning Commissions, City Council, and the County Board of Commissioners 24 times since the project began. We utilized a variety of outreach methods, as you can see here, including 5 different in-person meetings with study area residents and property owners, and a month-long virtual open house that involved 1,500 participants. Most folks in the urban reserve study area, except those who have moved there since 2018 when the work began, have received 4 different mailings, in addition to the formal public notice that was just mailed last month. I want to take a moment to discuss the difference between the city limits, the UGB, and the proposed urban reserves. The gray area is the Eugene city limits on this map here, or the incorporated area, which we also call it. The black dashed line is the urban growth boundary. The white areas within the UGB, the urban growth boundary, show where the city can grow for now. This land is jointly managed by the city and the county. It should be enough land for our population and job growth through 2032. When we no longer have a 20-year supply of land within the UGB, then this city will need to expand. In orange are the proposed urban reserves. This is the land the city would gradually expand the UGB into incrementally over time as needed. Here is a graphic we developed for property owners. It's a little hard to read here, but it can also be found on our project webpage. It has different categories across the top depending on where you live or own property, and it shows the different services, taxes, jurisdictions, etc. along the side to help explain what will change with your land when it's included in urban reserves. The summary is that lands included in urban reserves remain rural, and the proposed plan policies help ensure this. Land in urban reserves retain county representation and services. They don't have a change in taxation and aren't eligible to annex to the city or be provided with city services. The proposed urban reserve we're discussing tonight is based on direction staff received in November 2020. After receiving recommendations from both planning commissions, the Lane County Board of Commissioners unanimously passed a motion in agreement with the Eugene City Council to initiate the adoption process for a 27-year urban reserve. This direction was in support of an urban reserve that does not include the study area's highest value farmland or adjacent properties with higher value soils. Both council and the board expressed an interest in preserving the highest value agricultural land from future urbanization. The proposed urban reserves includes just over 5,900 developable acres, which are expected to provide a 27-year supply of developable land, covering a planning period of 2032 to 2059. Finally, we're at the adoption process. Since receiving direction from the board and council at the end of the option development phase, staff have been refining and documenting our analysis. We have been report writing and assembling the adoption package for public review. On September 16th, a public hearing notice was mailed to almost 4,000 rural county residents and property owners inside and around the proposed urban reserves, including folks inside the UGB and adjacent, and other interested parties. On October 4th and October 11th, we held work sessions with the county and city planning commissions and are holding a joint public hearing here tonight. After tonight's public hearing, both commissions will hold meetings to deliberate and make their final recommendations. Then urban reserves adoption will be considered by the Board of Commissioners and City Council, who are the final decision makers. The components of the urban reserves adoption package are linked for your reference in attachment B. They are also included on the urban reserves project page. First is the draft City of Eugene and Lane County Ordinance. They are virtually identical. Included in the Lane County Ordinance are amendments in 4 different plans: the Metro Plan, the Eugene Comprehensive Plan, the Public Facilities and Services Plan, and the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan. The Eugene Ordinance includes all plan amendments except for the county's Rural Comprehensive Plan. Also included in the adoption package are intergovernmental agreements, IGAs, regarding coordinated planning between City of Eugene and Lane County, and with 10 statutory special districts whose boundaries are included in urban reserves. Mostly these are fire districts, but they also include Junction City Water Control District, LTD, and Willamette. These IGAs are administrative, meaning they've already been negotiated with each of the service districts and are ready to be signed by the City Council and Board of Commissioners when urban reserves are adopted. The adoption package also includes extensive legal findings that were developed to document our work and support establishment of the Eugene Urban Reserves. This is also included in your attachment B and on our project page. Findings include the following: a public engagement summary, the Eugene Urban Reserve Study, which documents the analysis of land for inclusion in Eugene Urban Reserves, based on the steps that are required by state statute and rules. The study includes 18 suitability analysis sub-area reports and a separate serviceability analysis report. Also included as an attachment to the findings is the Eugene Urban Reserves technical memo, which describes the assumptions and methodology behind the technical analysis that went into urban reserves and how this work informs the land selected. It includes the urban reserves land need model and the map documentation of land that is classified as undevelopable. Finally, there is a list of tax lots within the Eugene Urban Reserves included in the adoption package. So again, tonight, we welcome your input. Thank you for participating. We also welcome your written testimony, which you can email to the dedicated Urban Reserves email account that you can see here. All written public testimony that was received by 5 p.m. yesterday was already forwarded to both planning commissions. Following the joint public hearing, the planning commissions are scheduled to deliberate separately, as I noted, with Eugene currently scheduled for November 1st and Lane County scheduled for November 15th. The planning commissions will make recommendations to the City Council and Board of Commissioners, who are the final decision makers. We expect that work to take place after the first of the year. And thank you again for participating tonight and for your time. If you wish to review additional material, the Urban Reserves project page listed here contains a wealth of information. You may also contact staff with questions or provide written testimony at the dedicated Urban Reserves email address at urbanreserves@eugene-or.gov. I'll now turn the meeting back to Chair Isaacson. Thank you. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Before we open the public hearing, I want to let the public know a little bit about the planning commissions and our role. We are unpaid volunteers appointed by the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners. As planning commissioners, we've committed to balancing all of the community's needs and to making the best recommendations we possibly can based on the city and county policies and Oregon law for us and for future generations. That can be pretty tough to do, and we know not everyone will agree with every recommendation we make. I want to thank everyone for their patience and flexibility as we work within this virtual meeting format. As always, feel free to contact staff if there is testimony that you are not able to provide or wish to provide in a different manner. I would like to invite our moderator, Linda Baker, to provide instructions on how to get into the queue for providing verbal testimony at tonight's hearing.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Baker, and I will be the moderator for tonight's meeting. I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items before we begin with regular proceedings. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for joining us in this virtual hearing and note that tonight's hearing is being recorded. Since we're meeting virtually, I'm going to provide instructions on how to request to speak during the public testimony section. When staff announces that it's time for testimony, you can get in the queue by raising your virtual hand. To do this, please click the raise hand button in the menu if you're joining us on computer, tablet, or smart device. If you're joining us by phone, you must dial *9. At the beginning of testimony, you should start by stating your name, your address, and whether you're in support, opposition, or neutral to the proposal. Public testimony time is 3 minutes long. I will provide you a time reminder when you have 30 seconds left to speak, and once the time is up, you will be returned to attendee status. More instructions will be provided prior to the beginning of the public testimony section of our hearing tonight. With that, it is great to have everyone here tonight, and I will hand it back to the Eugene Planning Commission Chair.
Thank you, Linda. As Linda presented, if you would like to speak and have not already raised your hand, please raise your virtual hand now to get into the queue. Testimony presented at this public hearing should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria and other criteria that the speaker believes apply to the decision. In general, the approval criteria requires that any plan amendments must be consistent with the applicable state planning goals, the Metro Plan, Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, and any applicable refinement plans. Staff have prepared findings to demonstrate that this is the case with the proposed amendments, which are included in the materials for this meeting. For Eugene, the applicable approval criteria are EC 9-8074 for the proposed Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan amendments, EC 9.8424 for the proposed Public Facilities and Service Plan amendments, and EC 9.7735 for the proposed Type 2 Metro Plan amendments.
For Lane County, the applicable approval criteria are Lane Code 16400 for the proposed Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan amendments, and Lane Code 12300 for the proposed Type 2 Metro Plan amendments and the proposed Public Facilities and Services Plan amendments.
And with that, I am now opening the public hearing for the Eugene Planning Commission, and I invite Chair Smith to open the public hearing for Lane County.
Thank you. The Lane County Planning Commission public hearing is now opened.
Moderators, how many speakers do we have in the queue?
So we currently have 3 speakers in the queue.
Okay. So let me pull up this. We don't have a timer, so we're going to do this a little informally. As long as people don't go over, then I'm fine. But based on the number of speakers in the queue, each speaker will be given 3 minutes to speak. We'll encourage you to submit any written testimony you have, as well as a dedicated email address, urbanreserves@eugene-or.gov. Again, urbanreserves@eugene-or.gov. Linda, will you please provide any further instructions and then begin the hearing testimony?
Okay. Hi again, everyone. I will announce whose turn it is to provide public testimony, as well as announcing who is up next. When you're announced for public testimony, you will be promoted to a Zoom panelist, which will allow you to unmute and turn on your video if you choose. Please do not unmute or turn on your video until it is your turn for public testimony. Please start by clearly stating your name, your address, and whether you're in support, opposition, or neutral to the proposal. Public testimony is up to 3 minutes long, and when your public testimony is concluded, you will be returned to the Zoom attendee status. If any technical difficulties are encountered, we'll move on to the next person in the queue and try again after that person's comment. With these instructions out of the way, let's see, our first speaker is Mark Rabinowitz. And I'm adding you as a Zoom panelist now. Hold on one moment.
Ms. Baker, what I'll do is I will click my own timer. That we don't have a timer for the speaker to see. I'll just wave my hand when it's getting closed so that the speaker knows to begin wrapping it up.
Okay. Oh, that's something that I will give time, but if you would like to give time, I will hand it off to you.
That sounds perfectly fine. If you've got it down, then great.
Okay. All right, Mark, are you having technical difficulties?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I will be submitting technical comments. I live in Lane County, and I am in opposition to this for several reasons. I don't support creating financial incentives to destroy agriculture. I do not support the proposal to merge Eugene into Junction City and almost to Veneta. Some of the areas, especially those west of Green Hill Road, are those that were the purpose of the failed West Eugene Parkway plan. This would facilitate that sprawl without having to get that illegal project approved. And most important, this is planning for impossible futures. We are in an energy crisis, which is not only causing climate change, but we are totally dependent on the Alaska pipeline to run the motors of Oregon, including the food delivery trucks. And the Alaska pipeline has dropped 80% in the last 30 years, and there is no plan B. So if you're planning for 2059, you need to consider, where's the energy going to come from? Since the oil that we enjoy today won't be there then. You also need to be more respectful of agriculture. At the January 2020 meeting for this program, there was literature that claimed that the Royal Blue Organics farm on Royal Avenue was vacant land. Well, it's not vacant. It's being used to feed people. And the idea that food can be grown somewhere else and shipped over a long distance is a huge part of the mess that we're in that's getting worse. And I realize the real estate industry has a lot more power than those who keep us fed, but in the long run, it's those who keep us fed that is more important than speculative real estate. So almost 20 years ago, the Lane Council of Governments assumed that gasoline would increase in cost to $2.50 a gallon by 2025, which obviously was incorrect. And some of them admitted at the time it was incorrect, but this is what passes for planning in Lane County. So you need to go back to the start and realize we live on a finite planet, that we're running out of the fuel, the concentrated fuel that powers the whole show, and make plans for possible futures instead of impossible futures, and value agriculture as more important than strip malls and townhouses that aren't designed to last beyond the lifespan of the financing of the project. And there's no hint of any of this in any of these plans. And I'm out of time. I will be submitting technical comments to your email address.
Mark, I have one quick question. What is your address?
I'll have that in the, I will send that to you. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so our next speaker is Sharon Blick, and I'm adding you as a panelist now, so hold on one moment, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can I go ahead? Should I go ahead? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right, my name is Sharon Blick. I live at 89030 Fir Butte Road. For the past 15 years, my husband and I have owned and operated the Living Earth Farm at this address, which is now within the Urban Reserve Plan. This plan is flawed. Despite its claims to protect farmland, it did not inventory current farm businesses surrounding Eugene. The planners assume that only farms are located in exclusive farm use zoning and that no farms are located in rural residential zoning. This is a false assumption. Our farm and many others are located in rural residential zoning, and much of the EFU zoning is occupied by rural residents who do no farming. Also, the plan did not inventory which farms are growing food for our local community, as opposed to the much more numerous and larger local farms which are growing grass seed, hemp, meadow foam, wine grapes, and other non-food crops. Growing food is the least profitable use of local land, but also the most important. What good is planning if it does not plan for our food supply? Stop taking the food supply for granted. Climate change is making it harder and harder to farm. Increasing wildfires, snowstorms, and floods make it more and more likely that food transport will be crippled at the same time that consumers make a run on the grocery stores. If we rely only on the invisible hand of the market, we will come up empty-handed. Now is the time to plan for local food security. The Urban Reserves Plan purports to have inventoried natural areas, but no member of the planning team ever came to our property. No one ever asked us or our neighbors what wildlife lives here in the woods surrounding Fir Butte and Oak Hill. Our property and the surrounding area is mostly oak woodland, an endangered habitat which is already 97% destroyed in the Willamette Valley. We have seen or heard on our 15-acre property 136 species of birds, 16 species of mammals, 9 species of reptiles and amphibians, and 20 species of butterflies. Many species of wildlife breed and raise their young on our land, including the acorn woodpecker, which is state listed as a sensitive species and federally listed as a species of concern. This species and many others would not be able to persist if this land became urbanized. The Urban Reserve Plan proposes to put 200 houses on our 15 acres. That is only going to happen over my dead body.
So the next speaker that we have in the queue is Bill Clues, and I'll be adding you now. Hold on one moment, okay? All right, so I am promoting Bill to panelist. Are you having some difficulties, please? Ah, I think you're in now.
Okay, I think I'm with you now. Can you hear me and see me? Great, it's a success. My name is Bill Close, 375 West 4th Avenue, Suite 204 in Eugene. I'm appearing tonight as attorney for Wildish Land Company. Let me start by saying I love Zoom meetings. Please keep doing them even after COVID is history. My client, Steve Wildish, has given a letter to the city explaining in detail what I'm going to touch on tonight, and I forwarded that to city staff for inclusion in the record. My client objects only to the inclusion of 23 acres of Wildish property in the urban reserves. These 23 acres are vacant. Excuse me, they've got the Wildish offices on one of them, but what I'm saying is they're not mined yet, but they are planned and zoned for sand and gravel as a significant Goal 5 resource. Because of that status, they simply don't qualify for inclusion in the urban reserve. The urban reserve rule includes the definition of developable land, which includes lands that are, quote, designated or zoned to protect natural resources. And that's what all of the Wildish property is. Staff, in their findings, correctly recognize that wetlands are not developable and riparian corridors are not developable. Sand and gravel aggregate resources are another Goal 5 resource of equal status. So under state law, this property simply can't be included in the urban reserves. That's the simple theory. I'd also like to mention that all 23 of these acres are part of a several hundred acre mining operation that we're all familiar with. Those acres won't be mined while I'm alive. They won't be mined during the period of the urban reserves, but eventually they will be mined. But of course, they won't be mined if they're consumed by urban uses. What's being proposed here is really, you could really think of it as a simple form of cannibalism. That is, the city's proposing to expand urban uses onto land that has the resources that are needed to build the urban uses. And that kind of flunks the common sense test. The third point is that even if the city could include this in the inventory, it would have to go through a full Goal 5 analysis. That is, it would have to work with the county to identify the total inventory that's remaining, how much inventory is needed to service the metro area, and then it would have to justify including this acreage in terms of impacts. And that would be a slow, tedious, and difficult process. And I think the final conclusion would be the city could not justify doing that. So that's the short of it. Thank you very much for your consideration. If I've got a couple of minutes, I want to point out that the city is proposing to include the Eugene sand and gravel property that's adjacent to nearby to the south. That is sand and gravel land that has been mined out and has been reclaimed, and that is land that's totally appropriate to be included in the urban reserves. The land that we're talking about that's owned by Wildish is not in that category. It hasn't been touched yet. That's it. Thank you for hearing me out.
Okay, so Bill is our last speaker. Oh, we have one more person that just raised their hand, and Cassia Delaval. I will promote you to panelist. Hold on one moment, okay?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me at this point? Okay. I'm going to speak really quickly because my battery is going out, and I was not planning to make a comment, but I feel very strongly about the comments Mark and Shannon made. My name is Cassia Delabo. I live out Bloomberg Road, and there are many, many small farms and agricultural areas that are not being considered, and the impact of urbanizing those areas, I think, will have a huge impact on livability, green space, etc. And I'm talking very quickly because literally my computer may crash. I will send written comment. I'm really sad to see there's only 3 people here commenting. And this is a classic issue, I think, that the commission has had trouble with, and Eugene is getting participation from citizens and county residents. I'm not sure what the issue is, but it seems there's very small participation in these types of meetings. I'm not sure if it's the timing or people getting informed properly. Not everybody reads their email, not everybody reads the newspaper. I'm not sure. So I just would like to advocate that there is much more publicity. If you look at the turnout in all of these meetings over the last few years, it's a very small group of people. And I really applaud both Sharon and Mark for coming and making a very clear statement about the concerns. Here on Bloomberg Road, we do have wetlands and we have lots of wildlife, and there's work to get a transfer path so that wildlife can make it across I-5, which is a deadly passage area. We have CV Loop as well, which is a farmland. And I'm deeply concerned that we are going to be overriding the very important resources of green space, agriculture for housing. And that's all I'll say right now, but thank you so much. And I'll close it at that. And I will submit written testimony. Thank you so much.
Planning Commissioners, Cassia was our last speaker. Oh, we have another person that just raised their hand, Patty Duncan. Hold on one moment and I will add you as panelist. Patty, are you there?
I'm trying to be here.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get better light.
We can see and hear you, Patty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a very non-technical comment, just a very personal comment. I oppose this. I live at 88806 Green Hill Road. I'm like just outside the urban growth boundary. And I know plenty of people in Santa Clara who have for decades opposed annexation into the city of Eugene for many reasons. And the similar reasons to why I oppose this step, which would eventually lead to annexation into the city of my property and massive pieces of property that are targeted by the map. So it's not a very legal statement that I have to make, just a very personal one that I oppose this move. Thank you.
So Patty was our last speaker.
Well, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your evening to share your thoughts with us. Unless there are any objections from planning commissioners or staff, the Eugene Planning Commission hearing will now close. Seeing none, Eugene Planning Commission public hearing is now closed. The record will remain open for written testimony, however. Written testimony received by October 25th, 2022 at 5 p.m. will be provided to the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners for their consideration. Written testimony received after that date will be forwarded to the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners for their consideration, along with the recommendations from both planning commissions. There is a dedicated email address the public can use for submitting testimony. Again, it is urbanreserves@eugene-or.gov.
And the Lane County Planning Commission public hearing is also now closed, and the record will remain open for written testimony as Eugene Commissioner Isaacson explained.
Is there a staff response to the testimony offered this evening?
Staff will be, Emily raised her hand. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make a quick clarification. That written testimony received by October 25th at 5 o'clock will be provided to the planning commissions. I think that that what Commissioner Isaacson accidentally said was Eugene City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners, and what we meant for him to say there is that it will be Eugene Planning Commission and Lane County Planning Commission. Any written testimony that comes in after that date will be forwarded for review by the City Council and the board. Thank you.
Any other staff comment?
We will be providing memos to both planning commissions for your upcoming deliberations work sessions, and we're happy to respond to any of the substantive testimony that we received at that time. I would like to note one thing, that the city's policy is is only voluntary annexation. That's just one clarification note I would like to make, that nowhere in this proposal is the city or the county requiring anyone at any time to annex their property. Even if their property comes into the UGB, annexation is completely voluntary. And so your property does not have to change if you don't choose to do so. That is our current policy. So I just wanted to make that one clarification point.
Well, the next part is asking if any commissioners or from either jurisdiction have any questions. And it looks like there are some on the county side. So Commissioner Smith, do you want to take and moderate your side?
Sure, I will. Thanks. I think Bruce Hadley, you had your hand up first. At least it's the first one I saw. So go ahead.
Actually, I think Stephen was first. Stephen, you want to go?
Steve?
Sure, Bruce. No problem. Thank you, Kathy. I had two questions based on the testimony that was provided. The first based on Ms. Blick, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm hoping I wrote this down correctly, but towards the end of her testimony, she said that she if the urban reserves are approved as currently proposed, that her 15 acres would be converted to 200 units of housing. And I think I captured that correctly. Now, it's my understanding, at least from what I was reading in the materials, that there's nothing specific that says such and such acres are going to be converted into such and such a housing. Or did I miss that? Staff, can you address that question?
Yes, that's correct. I believe, my guess is what she was looking at is one of our analysis maps that shows potential residential capacity on the land that's proposed for urban reserves, which is part of what we have to do in order to estimate how much land we would need for urban reserves. But those are all potential estimates. If the landowner so chooses to develop their property that way in the future, if they choose to annex their property into the city in the future, if their property is before that in the urban growth boundary. So there's a lot of ifs there. It's part of our, but it was part of our analysis, and it is part of one of the maps that's included in the suitability analysis reports that was slightly misconstrued.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, I have one other question. Would you want me to go ahead with that now?
Yes, please do, Steve.
Okay, Mr. Close talked about the 23 acres owned by Wildish, and commented that those acres are currently zoned for sand and gravel. I know that sand and gravel is a protected resource under Goal 5. I'm assuming staff will be specifically addressing that comment from Mr. Close between now and our hearing, or at our, not our hearing, now and our upcoming deliberation.
Yes, we can provide more information on our understanding of the urban reserves rules and how the Goal 5 resources work into that compared to with the urban growth boundary. Okay, we can provide more information.
No further questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Bruce?
Yeah, my question is for Rebecca. You said that the city's policy is not to force anyone to annex, but isn't it true that if I'm in a rural area with a septic system and someone on the other side of me annexes, and now there's a sewer line in front of my house, if my septic system fails, I am no longer permitted to repair that septic system, correct?
Maybe Lindsay can help me answer that question, because that sounds more like a county question. I can't really answer that.
I think we're gonna have to get back to you on that, Commissioner Hadley.
Okay, well, I'm speaking from personal experience because that's exactly what happened on my street, which was annexed by the city of Florence. And a couple of land use attorneys have said that once the sewer line's in my street, anybody within 300 feet, the county will no longer issue a permit for septic repair. So at that point, I would be indirectly forced to annex. And I'm not happy about it. And that's something that, you know, these people should be aware of, I think. Anyway, thank you.
And Commissioner Smith, I have Commissioner Lear on my side. Commissioner Lear?
Yeah, this overlaps a little with some of the last few questions and is of the similar character. Would it be possible for staff to provide maybe just a little list of potential negative effects, effects on use, effects on value of property being included in the urban reserves, and then also a similar list for when it's included in the urban growth boundary, just to acquaint myself a little bit better if, you know, there are negative potential effects?
Sure, yes. Could we, would you like me to attempt that right now, or could that be included?
Yeah, feel free if you can speak to it, you know, extemporaneously.
So I think probably it's hard to speak generally because everybody has a different perspective, right? But even though you can control what you can do on your own property, I think people are afraid of potentially the development down the road, that if their property comes into the urban growth boundary, then their neighbors could annex, and then there could be more development nearby that could potentially impact their quality of life, even if they chose not to change the use of their property. But I hate to speculate, but that's what testimony is for, to hear from folks what they're concerned about. But if you have a more specific question that I might be able to address, I'm happy to address that too.
Commissioner Lear?
I'm just thinking through, you know, the answer, and I guess it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer, as you said, because so many people perceive different potential ill effects. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking, I guess, for things that staff has reviewed that are more concrete in terms of potential to affect process, as the previous Commissioner Hadley brought up, septic, you know, or any other kind of land use or right. And there may be none that you can cite. It may be all the indirect effects that you're mentioning, but I'm just wondering if there's been any material prepared on this.
Well, we did prepare that property owner matrix. So it talks about how your property can change if you're in urban reserves, or once you're in the urban growth boundary, or once you're in the city limits. One of the things is that the proposed policies, if you're in urban reserves, really the only thing that changes if you're in urban reserves is the proposed policies limit you from attempting a zone change if you're on resource land to non-resource land, which Lindsay can speak to a little bit more if you're interested. It's very difficult to do already. It's very expensive and timely and costly. But the urban reserves policies that we're putting in place, that we're proposing, are freezing the uses as what they currently are, so that if you want to intensify your property, you will do that once it urbanizes, or once it comes into the city limits, if you choose to bring it into the city limits once it is in the urban growth boundary, so that it doesn't intensify before then. So that could be perceived, depending on the landowner, that could be perceived as a negative if they thought that they wanted to try to do something different on their land than what was already allowed outright on their property.
And Commissioner Bailey, I see you next, but I wanted to throw myself into the queue. The question I had was the last commenter, I believe her name was Ms. Cassidy, mentioned CV Loop farmland. Full disclosure, I operate a company that farms 20 acres on CV Loop, and there is a lot of farms on CV Loop that do a ton of different agricultural products. A lot of it is food. I don't believe CV Loop is included in this plan. That's the east side of I-5 will be technically Springfield, even though it has a Eugene address. But I just want to make sure if I'm somehow wrong in that.
No, that is correct. It
Okay.
is on the east side of I-5, and that's not included in the urban reserves proposal.
Great. So I won't have any upset neighbors knocking on my door tomorrow. So that's great.
No.
Bailey, you're up.
And I just wanted to follow up with Commissioner Lear that we'll think on your question a little bit more and include it in your packet for your deliberations as well.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you. Rebecca, I admit to not having read all of the 18 sub-area reports, but I'm wondering, given it came up in the testimony, have there been any wildlife studies done along with all of your land studies in any of these areas and consideration of impact on wildlife in the urban reserve?
Right. So this is a land study. So we're looking at the types of land and knowing that riparian areas, wetlands, other natural areas, already protected natural areas contain habitat and contain wildlife. So I would say secondarily, we have looked at wildlife. We have not done any direct wildlife studies. That's not prescribed at this level of urban reserves planning.
Okay, it looks like I have a couple of Lane County commissioners up. Jeff, I believe you were first. Let's see if I got that right this time, and then Bruce.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to address Eugene Planning Commissioner Lear's question. Myself being the newest Lane County Planning Commissioner, I had similar questions last week and 2 weeks ago in our last meeting. And my takeaway so far, and Rebecca or Lindsay, please correct me if this is not accurate. Basically, if someone is allowed to site a single family dwelling currently, they may do so once land is incorporated into urban reserves. And the two things that are most noteworthy that I noted that would be given up would be the ability to upzone to a more intensive use of the land, and to change from a resource designation to a non-resource. Those are the three takeaways: one of rights retained, and two of rights given up that seem to float to the surface for me. Lindsay and Rebecca, would that be accurate?
Very nicely said, Commissioner Choate. I will point to you to answer our questions from now
on. Bruce?
Yeah, from going through the public testimony, it appears that, I don't want to oversimplify things, but most people are concerned about giving up their chosen rural lifestyle when they become part of the UGB or part of these boundaries. One that stood out to me in the opposite direction was Mr. Aaron Silverstein wants to be in the UGB and was refused. Has that been resolved? And I don't mean to be talking about Mr. Silverstein in particular, but if I own property that's close to the boundary, is there some mechanism by which I can petition to be included?
Well, you can always let us know, like he has, and present information and share it with us. If there's information that we can consider that we haven't considered that is consistent with our analysis for our entire study area, then we will reconsider it as we can. But we need to be fair for everyone. And so I'd say that this is the avenue to do that for, and that's why public notice happens. And that's why we sent out 4,000 letters, is for folks to review the information and let us know if they think that there is a factual error or a mistake or information that we didn't include that should be included, so that we can review that before a decision's made.
So I guess what I'm asking is, once this study is adopted, once the powers have established these are the urban reserves, is that the end of it? Can that be adjusted 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Can I get my property in later on?
Right. That's a good question. We do have built in a policy to review urban reserves 10 years after the first time we expand the urban growth boundary. But technically, Emily, if we were directed to do so by decision makers, technically, I believe we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, we could, so long as we didn't add more land into urban reserves than we're allowed to based on the 30-year limitation in state law.
And now we're at 27.
You know, technically an individual could say, you know, go to their elected officials and say, we'd really like you to initiate an urban reserve expansion, include my property. But it's so very prescriptive under state law. And so, for example, when it comes to wildlife habitat, we can consider that if it has already been designated by the county as a Goal 5 resource, because we can look at whether something is a Goal 5 resource, or you know, it's very prescriptive. So just the mere desire to come in, or even common sense, doesn't necessarily prevail in terms of what you as a planning commission can, you know, recommend from a legal basis, or what could be done. But it could be done anytime, so long as we stay within the time limit boundaries that are set by the state law.
Thank you.
I have just one clarification follow-up on Bruce's read of Mr. Silverstein's note. Is where I can't tell exactly where his property is. He has a Loma. Where is that located within?
His property is within the Clear Lake sub area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lastly, I have a question for staff. You mentioned that we had mailed out 4,000 notices. I believe that the previous slide during the presentation was that there were 4 mailings. I'm assuming each mailing was 1,000. Am I just doing some math real quick on that?
Thank you for the clarification. That slide was referring to the 4 previous mailings. So we've done mailings to inform folks about public meetings that we've held throughout the planning process. We held 2 large public meetings downtown at the library, and we held 3 public meetings near the study area in January of 2020. And those mailings were to invite folks who lived or owned property in the study area to those meetings. That was those 4 mailings. Then these 4,000 notices are the official public notice that went out for this public hearing.
Got it. I don't think you'll probably be able to answer this question, but I'd be really super impressed if you can. What are the odds potentially impacted by this proposal and have not been sent a notice throughout the entire process?
The odds. Well, We,
And I guess
I
what I'm
think,
saying is,
quite low.
I
Quite
guess what I'm saying
low.
is if there's, 15,000 people, we send out 4,000 notices, you can do some odds there. But if we send out multiple and we switch it up, is it, could we routinely see this come up? In that
Yeah.
when it gets to this stage, I didn't see it. And, it's not anybody's fault. There's a lot of things going on. It's easy to have things slip in the mail. But I think it's important for staff and for us to share how much effort goes into making sure people know about this, and also the public to know that this is not a small percentage, if it isn't small, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, it's I'm not going to play the odds, but I am going to note that if someone purchased property within the last year or so, then this notice could be the first time that they're receiving information about urban reserves. And folks who are, and we hadn't previously noticed folks who were inside the urban growth boundary, but we did with this public notice. So we actually expanded. This public notice went to more folks than we had been communicating with. So we wanted to make sure that we were covering people who were directly impacted and people adjacent and around the proposed urban reserves for the public hearing notice. That didn't really answer your question, but it gave me an opportunity to say that.
Thank you.
Could I quickly follow up on Commissioner Bailing's question, because my colleague just reminded me that we did include federally and state listed threatened and endangered species habitat as our undevelopable property as well in our analysis. And I forgot to mention that earlier.
Commissioner Smith, I think you have a commissioner who has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Please. And I still don't, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy. That's Steve Dignam. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Isaacson's recent comment and offer a bit of remonstrance. I can't remember who exactly it was. One of our people who provide testimony, either Ms. Delabauer or Ms. Duncan, and talked about how there were a limited number of folks here this evening providing public comment. And again, I might not be capturing her exact words, but she said, gosh, it doesn't seem like there's been much outreach by the county. I have to dispute that. I mean, Rebecca went through in one of her early slides all of the outreach that the county has done, the open house, the public forums. It seems to me, and I mean, if folks haven't heard about it before, I apologize, but it seems to me like county staff has really gone above and beyond in terms of trying to make sure that the public outreach is being done. And in fact, I think I scanned one of the public comments from DLCD. They commented and acknowledged and evidently were impressed with the public outreach that we did. So if there are people who have not, I'm very sorry, but the county has and the city have done a lot of outreach.
Thanks, Steve. Any other comments from any of the other Lane County commissioners?
Any comments from Eugene's side?
Lindsay, did you have a staff comment before we move to the next step?
Thank you, Chair Smith. No, I think I'm good. I've been taking good notes, and Rebecca and I will work on some follow-up memos to address all the questions and discussion tonight for the upcoming deliberations.
Thank you.
Okay, the next steps in the process that the Eugene Planning Commission will hold time on its November 1st agenda to deliberate and make a recommendation on this matter. The Lane County Public Planning Commission is holding time on its November 15th agenda to do the same. On behalf of both planning commissions, thank you for joining us and speaking tonight. The meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission is now adjourned.
And the meeting of the Lane County Planning Commission is now adjourned as well. Good night.